The crystalline spires of the Vexalian royal palace stretched toward the twin moons, their surfaces refracting the amber sunlight in mesmerizing patterns. Ambassador Sarah Chen adjusted her environmental suit's temperature controls, still unused to the planet's intense heat after 3 months of trade negotiations. She stood among the assembled dignitaries in the Grand Court, trying not to fidget as the wait stretched on. "The king approaches," announced a herald, his metallic scales gleaming as he bowed deeply. The gathered ambassadors from 17 different species straightened their postures. Sarah noticed several council members exchanging meaningful glances. Something felt off about this unexpected assembly, but she couldn't quite place what. King Varric strode into the chamber, his ceremonial armor catching the light. Behind him walked a small figure that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. Princess Cthera, barely 8 standard years old by human reckoning. The child's scales held an iridescent quality unlike the metallic sheen of other Vexalians, and her eyes seemed to shift colors as she walked. "Honorable representatives of the Galactic Council," King Varric's voice boomed through the chamber. "I have summoned you to witness a matter of royal succession." Sarah's diplomatic training kicked in as she noticed the princess's slight trembling. The child's eyes darted between the assembled aliens, and Sarah felt an unexpected wave of emotion wash over her: fear, confusion, and a deep sense of loneliness. She blinked, startled by the intensity of the sensation. "My daughter, Princess Cthera, has manifested abilities that make her unsuitable for the Vexalian throne," the king continued, his tone formal but holding an edge of disgust. "Her empathic resonance threatens the stability of our court and the purity of our lineage." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Sarah watched as Cthera seemed to shrink into herself, each whispered comment making her flinch as if physically struck. Another wave of emotion hit the ambassador. Shame, so profound it made her own chest tight. "In accordance with our laws, I hereby declare her removed from the line of succession and ward of the Galactic Council, to be placed as they see fit." King Varric's words fell like stones in the silent chamber. The council members began their typical political maneuvering immediately. The Zentadian representative spoke of rehabilitation facilities, while the Mareth suggested specialized containment education. None of them looked at Cthera as they discussed her fate like a problematic trade agreement. Sarah felt something stir in her chest, a memory of her own childhood, of being the only one who couldn't access the neural learning networks, of being called outdated by her more augmented peers. Without conscious thought, she found herself stepping forward. "I invoke the right of guardianship," she declared, her voice clear and steady despite her racing heart. The chamber fell silent. Even the king looked startled, his scaled brows rising in surprise. "That ancient human custom," a council member scoffed. "It hasn't been used in centuries. It remains valid under Section 47 of the Interspecies Relations Charter." Sarah continued, silently thanking her habit of studying obscure regulations. "As Earth's representative, I claim responsibility for Princess Cthera's care and education." The chamber erupted in barely concealed laughter. Sarah caught fragments of their thoughts. Primitive humans, emotional weakness, career suicide. But she kept her eyes fixed on Cthera, who had lifted her head for the first time since entering the chamber. The princess's eyes met hers, shifting from deep purple to a soft gold. Another wave of emotion flowed between them, but this time it held something different, a tiny spark of hope. "The human accepts responsibility?" King Varrix asked, his tone making it clear he expected her to reconsider. "I do," Sarah replied firmly, "under Earth's protection and guidance." As the council members continued their barely hidden amusement, Sarah walked forward and knelt before Cthera. "Would you like to see Earth?" she asked softly, offering her hand. Cthera looked at her father, who had already turned away, then back at Sarah. Slowly, her small-scaled hand reached out and took the humans. Behind them, the council's laughter echoed off the crystal walls, but Sarah didn't care. She had made her choice, and somehow, She knew it was right. The descent into Earth's atmosphere painted New Singapore's skyline in the soft glow of dawn. Thera pressed her scaled hands against the shuttle's viewport, her eyes shifting to a mesmerized azure as she watched the city's environmental shields shimmer with morning condensation. "What is that?" she whispered, pointing at the gathering clouds above the city's upper levels. Sarah smiled, remembering the weather report she'd checked earlier. "That's rain coming. Water that falls from the sky." The young princess's crest lifted in surprise. "But water should be contained, controlled. That's what the royal teachers always said." Their shuttle docked at Sarah's residential complex, and she guided Thera through the airlock adaptation chamber. The environmental technicians had assured her that Earth's atmosphere would be compatible with Vexalian physiology, but they needed to adjust gradually. "Welcome home," Sarah said, opening the door to her apartment on the 157th floor. She'd spent the entire shuttle ride wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. Her apartment wasn't exactly designed for a princess, let alone a Vexalian child with empathic abilities. Thera stepped inside, her tail curling slightly as she took in the modest living space. Her eyes shifted to a warm amber as she noticed the wall of real plants Sarah maintained, a luxury in the vertical city. The first raindrop hit the window with a soft pat. Thera jumped, her scales flickering with iridescent patterns. More drops followed, creating a gentle rhythm against the transparent aluminum. The princess's eyes widened, shifting through colors faster than Sarah could track. "I feel them," Thera whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "Each drop. They're all different. They're all singing." Sarah watched as the young princess approached the window. She'd been briefed about Thera's empathic abilities, but nothing had prepared her for this. Then she felt it, a wave of pure joy, innocent and overwhelming, cascading through her mind. Thera's emotional projection swept through the apartment, then the floor, then the building. Sarah's comm unit lit up with messages from neighbors, all experiencing the same unexpected happiness. "Thera," Sarah called gently, seeing the princess's scales beginning to pulse with light. "Remember what we practiced on the shuttle. Find your center." But the princess was lost in the sensation. The rain intensified, and with it, the emotional broadcast grew stronger. Sarah could feel the attention of the council's monitoring agents sharpening, waiting for her to fail at the first challenge. Instead of panic, Sarah felt a strange calm. She walked to her storage unit and retrieved a worn wooden box, her grandmother's legacy. "Thera," she said softly, opening the box to reveal a simple set of meditation chimes. "Watch." She struck the first chime. The clear note cut through the emotional storm, drawing the princess's attention. Sarah struck the second chime, then the third, creating a simple harmony that her grandmother had taught her years ago. Thera's color shifting slowed, her eyes fixed on the chimes, their sound providing an anchor point in the overwhelming sensory experience. "Would you like to try?" Sarah offered the striker to the princess. Thera's scaled hand trembled slightly as she took it. She struck the first chime hesitantly, then smiled as the pure tone rang out. The emotional broadcast began to focus, shifting from chaotic joy to gentle wonder. Sarah's comm unit chimed with a priority message from the council observers. She ignored it. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the floor beside Thera, watching as the princess discovered the simple joy of making music while the rain painted patterns on the window. "The rain," Thera said softly, striking another chime. "It makes its own music too." "Yes," Sarah replied, feeling the last traces of doubt fade from her mind. "On Earth, we believe there's music in everything. We just have to learn how to listen." The princess's scales settled into a soft, peaceful blue. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, creating a rainbow that arched over the city's spires. Sarah sent a silent thank you to her grandmother's wisdom, knowing that sometimes the oldest solutions were exactly what was needed. The meditation garden of New Singapore's botanical sector hummed with early morning activity. Thera sat cross-legged on a smooth stone, her scales shimmering with dawn's first light as she practiced her breathing exercises. 3 months had passed since her arrival on Earth, and the changes were remarkable. Sarah watched from a nearby bench, pretending to review diplomatic reports while actually observing her adopted daughter's progress. A small smile crossed her face as she noticed the subtle ways Thera's control had improved. The princess no longer projected her emotions unconsciously, instead choosing when and how to share them. Ambassador Chen, a familiar voice, interrupted her thoughts. The council representatives request their monthly observation session. Sarah nodded to her assistant without taking her eyes off Thera. They can observe from the garden's public viewing area. I won't have them disrupting her practice. Through the garden's transparent dome, she could see the council's observation vessel taking position. They'd been waiting for failure since day one, but what they were about to witness would change everything. Thera opened her eyes, which had settled into a calm sea-green shade. "They're here to watch again?" she asked, her voice carrying no trace of its former anxiety. "Yes, but remember what we discussed. This is your space, your practice." The princess nodded, her scaled fingers running over the meditation chimes she now carried everywhere. A group of human children entered the garden for their morning mindfulness class, their excited chatter filling the peaceful space. In the past, such chaos would have overwhelmed Thera's empathic senses. Today, she simply smiled and struck her chimes in a gentle pattern. The sound rippled through the garden, carrying with it a sense of calm that made the children pause and listen. "Would you like to join us?" Thera asked the group, her voice clear and confident. The children gathered around her stone, their curiosity overwhelming any hesitation about her alien appearance. Sarah felt a surge of pride as she watched Thera guide them through a simple breathing exercise, her empathic abilities now helping rather than hindering. "She's teaching them," one of the council observers muttered, their transmission accidentally broadcasting on an open channel. "The primitive species is allowing their young to be instructed by." Their words cut off as something extraordinary happened. The children, following Thera's guidance, had entered a state of perfect emotional harmony. The garden's biosensors registered the phenomenon, causing the plants to respond with synchronized bioluminescence. "That's beautiful," one little girl exclaimed, watching the patterns of light dance through the foliage. Thera's scales rippled with joy, but the emotion remained controlled, focused. "The plants can feel us too," she explained. "On Earth, I learned that everything is connected. We just have to understand how to listen and respond gently." Sarah's comm unit chimed with incoming messages from the council observers. She muted them all. "Let them watch and learn." A small boy raised his hand. "Can you teach us how to make the lights dance too?" Thera glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. The princess struck her chimes in a new pattern, one she had created herself by combining Vexalian harmonics with earth meditation techniques. "Close your eyes," she instructed the children. "Feel the sound move through you, like ripples in a pond. Then imagine those ripples touching the plants, greeting them like friends." The garden bloomed with new colors as the children followed her guidance. Even the council observers fell silent as they witnessed the perfect blend of alien ability and human teaching methods. "Ambassador," her assistant whispered urgently, "we're receiving requests from 3 different species. They want to know if Earth would consider accepting their children for similar training." Sarah watched as Thera guided the children through the end of their session, each small face glowing with accomplishment. "Tell them," she replied softly, "that Earth's gardens have room for everyone who wishes to grow." The holographic message from the Vexalian royal court hovered above Sarah's desk, its crystalline script casting prismatic shadows across her office. She read it for the 3rd time, her diplomatic training keeping her expression neutral despite the growing knot in her stomach. "They want me to return?" Thera asked from her perch by the window, her scales shifting to a deep indigo of concern. 6 months on Earth had given her enough control to sense her adopted mother's worry without being overwhelmed by it. Sarah turned to face her daughter. "They've requested a formal evaluation of your progress." She kept her voice steady, remembering how far they'd come. The Royal Education Ministry seems particularly interested in your recent achievements. The door chimed, admitting Sarah's assistant with a priority data crystal. The latest reports from the Council Observation Team, Ambassador. They're different this time. The crystal's projection filled the room with data streams. Farah's recent success with the garden class had sparked something unexpected. 17 families from different species had petitioned for Earth-based education for their children with unique abilities. The Council's dedicated monitoring of Cathera's inevitable failure had instead documented a revolutionary approach to emotional development. "Mother," Cathera said softly, using the term for the first time. Her scales flickered with determination. "I want to show them." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Show them what?" "Everything." The young princess moved to her meditation corner, where she had arranged her chimes in a complex pattern. "The royal teachers always said my empathy was a weakness, a flaw in the bloodline. But here," her claws traced the air above the chimes, drawing forth a harmony that made the air itself seem to shimmer. A notification flashed on Sarah's desk. The building's environmental sensors were registering unusual patterns of neural activity. But instead of the chaos they'd feared in those early days, the readings showed perfect, structured resonance. "You've been practicing something new," Sarah observed, watching as Cathera maintained the harmony with casual ease. The princess nodded. "I combined the meditation techniques with what I remembered from the royal archives about Vexillian sound shaping. Watch." She struck 3 chimes in quick succession. The sound rippled outward, but instead of affecting emotions directly, it created a visible pattern in the air, a 3-dimensional representation of the building's emotional state. "The morning meditation groups are here." Thera pointed to clusters of calm blue light. "The new students from Centauri are still adjusting here." She indicated areas of swirling yellow uncertainty. "But look how it all flows together, supporting each other. That's what Earth taught me." Sarah's comm unit erupted with incoming messages. The council observers had noticed the demonstration. Their demands for explanation competed with offers from research institutions, and most surprisingly, a direct inquiry from the Vexillian Science Academy. "Your father's court wants proof that Earth's methods work," Sarah said carefully. "Would you be willing to show them this?" Thera's eyes shifted to a brilliant gold of certainty. "I'll show them more. The royal teachers believe that control means suppression. Earth taught me that true control comes from understanding and acceptance." She paused, her scales rippling with a new idea. Perhaps we could invite them here. Let them see not just my progress, but everyone's." Sarah considered the diplomatic implications. Hosting the Vexillian royal court on Earth would be unprecedented. The potential for both disaster and breakthrough hung in perfect balance. Her daughter must have sensed her hesitation. Thera struck the chimes again, this time creating a harmony that carried confidence without pride, strength without aggression. The pattern it formed in the air was beautiful in its complexity, yet clear in its purpose. "You're right," Sarah said, reaching for her comm unit. "Let them come see what Earth's primitive methods have achieved. It's time they understood that their way isn't the only way to be strong." The evening meditation session in New Singapore's botanical sector ended with the usual soft chiming of bells. Thera guided her students, now numbering 32 from 7 different species, through their final breathing exercises. Her scales glowed with a gentle pearl sheen in the garden's twilight illumination. Sarah watched from her usual bench, pretending to review reports while actually admiring how far her daughter had come in 8 months. The council observers had become such a regular presence that she barely noticed their monitoring drones anymore. Her security implant buzzed with a subtle warning. Something was wrong. The garden's environmental shields were registering unauthorized access attempts. Sarah caught a flicker of movement in the upper observation deck, definitely not the regular council team. Thera's head tilted slightly, her scales shifting to a cautionary amber. She'd sensed it too. "Everyone," the princess addressed her students calmly, "let's practice our special awareness exercise. Remember how we discussed feeling the space around us? The children closed their eyes, following her lead without question. Sarah watched as her daughter carefully extended her empathic awareness, mapping the garden and its inhabitants. They'd practiced this, but never under real pressure. The first intruder dropped from the maintenance access panel, their stealth field flickering. The Vexalian insignia was visible for just a moment before the camouflage stabilized. "Stay calm," Cthera said softly to her students. "Feel the ripples of movement, just like we practiced with the pond waves." 3 more figures emerged from different access points. Their movements suggested military training, but their equipment wasn't standard Vexalian military issue. Sarah's hand moved toward her emergency beacon. "No, Mother." Cthera's voice touched her mind gently. "Let me show them what Earth has taught me." The intruders converged on the meditation circle. Their leader spoke in harsh Vexalian. "Princess Cthera, you will return to receive proper conditioning. Your abilities belong to the Empire." Cthera stood, her scales now shifting through patterns Sarah had never seen before. Not chaotic emotional response, but deliberate, controlled communication. The garden's plants responded to her presence, their bioluminescence synchronizing with her patterns. "I feel your fear," she said clearly, addressing the intruders. "Not of me, but for our people. You believe that without control, abilities like mine will bring chaos." She struck a single chime, its tone carrying through the garden. "But Earth has taught me there's another way." The leader raised a containment device. "Your emotional corruption ends now." Cthera's students opened their eyes in perfect unison. The empathic harmony they'd been practicing cascaded through the garden, not as a weapon, but as an invitation. Sarah watched in amazement as her daughter wove together the emotional energies of 7 different species into a tapestry of understanding. The intruders froze as the harmony reached them. Their stealth fields flickered and failed as Cthera's carefully constructed emotional message made contact. "Feel what control really means," the princess said softly. "Not suppression, but growth. Not fear, but acceptance." The leader's hands trembled. The containment device clattered to the ground as tears began flowing down his scaled face. How are you doing this without force?" "Because Earth showed me that true strength doesn't come from domination." Farah moved forward, her scales now glowing with a calm, confident light. "It comes from learning to embrace who we are, all of us together." The security teams would arrive soon. Sarah could hear the alerts. But they weren't needed. The would-be kidnappers had sunk to their knees, overwhelmed not by power, but by understanding. Cthera turned to her students, who watched with wide eyes. "And that," she said with a small smile, "is why we practice feeling the ripples in the pond. Because everything and everyone is connected, if we just learn to listen." Above them, the Council observation drones recorded everything. Sarah knew that by morning, this footage would spread across the galaxy. "Let them see," she thought. "Let them all see what happens when you choose understanding over fear." The holographic displays in Sarah's office cycled through scenes from across the galaxy. A Centaurian empath teaching meditation to a group of Mareth sensitives. A Vexalian school incorporating Earth-style emotional awareness into their curriculum. A Zentadian healing center playing recordings of Cthera's chimes. 30 million views, Sarah's assistant reported, updating the statistics. The footage of Princess Cthera's peaceful resolution has become the most studied diplomatic incident in recent galactic history. Sarah nodded, watching her daughter lead a virtual teaching session with students from 12 different worlds. Cthera's scales shimmered with a previously unseen pattern, happiness tinged with responsibility. "The council representatives have arrived for their emergency session," the assistant added quietly. "Let them wait a moment," Sarah replied, watching as Cthera guided her remote students through a new harmony exercise. The princess had developed it specifically for distance learning, allowing empathic connections to form even across light years. The door chimed, and a delegation of council members entered without waiting for permission. Their usual air of superiority had been replaced by something approaching uncertainty. Ambassador Chen, the lead council member, spoke, their translator struggling to convey their complex emotional state. We must discuss the unprecedented situation your methods have created. Cthulhu completed her lesson, her scales settling into a confident azure as she turned to face the delegation. You're concerned about the changes spreading through your worlds, she said, not as an accusation, but as a simple statement of fact. The council members' secondary breathing apparatus fluttered, a sign of agitation in their species. 17 major educational institutions have requested Earth instructors. 43 prominent families have demanded reforms in how we handle emotionally gifted children. The Vexalian Science Academy is proposing a complete overhaul of their empathic research protocols. And this troubles you? Sarah asked, keeping her tone neutral. The council member hesitated, their outer membrane shifting colors. It challenges everything we believed about emotional development and species hierarchy. Thera struck a single chime, its tone carrying a gentle reminder of harmony. When I first arrived on Earth, I thought I was broken, she said softly. My abilities were seen as a flaw, a disruption to be contained. But here, I learned that what makes us different can also make us stronger, if we're given the chance to grow in our own way. The youngest council member stepped forward, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with suppressed excitement. The success rates of Earth's methods are undeniable. The emotional stability achieved without suppression or technological intervention. It's revolutionary. Sarah pulled up another holographic display, showing the latest data from the botanical sector. Our gardens are open to all who wish to learn, she said. Earth has always believed that diversity strengthens us. Now we're simply sharing that belief with the galaxy. Thera's scales rippled with a new pattern as she addressed the council directly. You came here expecting to document a failure. Instead, you witnessed a transformation. The question now is, will you continue to resist this change, or will you help us guide it? The lead council member's translator crackled as they processed this challenge. Around them, the holographic displays showed more scenes of success. Children of different species learning together, ancient rivals finding common ground through shared emotional understanding, barriers of prejudice falling before the simple power of acceptance. The Galactic Council, they finally said, their voice carrying the weight of history, requests Earth's formal assistance in establishing an interspecies emotional education protocol. Sarah felt Cthulhu's joy ripple through the room, carefully controlled but radiantly clear. The princess struck her chimes in a pattern of celebration, and somewhere in the botanical sector, 1,000 plants bloomed in response. We accept, Sarah said simply, watching as the future rewrote itself one peaceful moment at a time. Cherry blossoms drifted on the morning breeze, their pale petals dancing through the botanical sector's carefully maintained atmosphere. Cthulhu stood beneath the largest tree, her scales shifting through subtle shades of rose gold as she absorbed the beauty of the moment. A year had passed since she first arrived on Earth, and everything had changed. He's here, Sarah said softly, approaching her daughter with measured steps. They both knew this day was coming, but preparation didn't make it easier. Cthulhu's scales flickered briefly with anxiety before settling into a calm, pearlescent sheen. Did he bring the royal guard? No, Sarah smiled, pride warming her voice. Your father came alone. The garden's main entrance cycled open, admitting a single figure. King Varix of the Vexalian Empire wore simple traveling robes instead of his ceremonial armor. His scales, usually polished to a militant shine, showed their natural metallic hue. Cthulhu remained by the cherry tree, her posture straight but not rigid. The morning meditation group of students, now numbering 50 from 15 different species, continued their practices nearby, their peaceful harmony filling the garden. The king stopped several meters away, his eyes taking in the scene. Sarah watched his expression shift as he noticed the details, the way the children's emotions flowed in structured patterns, the plants responding to their collective awareness, and at the center of it all, his daughter, radiating a quiet confidence he had never seen before. The Royal Science Academy's reports. he finally spoke, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. They didn't do justice to this. He gestured to the harmony surrounding them. Thera struck a single chime, its pure note carrying through the garden. The students, without breaking their meditation, adjusted their emotional frequencies to accommodate the sound. The cherry blossoms seemed to dance more vibrantly in response. "Would you like to feel it?" Thera asked her father, offering him the striker. The king's scales rippled with uncertainty. "I was taught that emotional projection was a weakness, that it needed to be contained, controlled, eliminated if possible." "So was I," Thera replied gently. "But Earth taught me that what we were taught isn't the only truth." She demonstrated a simple pattern with the chimes, creating visible ripples in the emotional atmosphere of the garden. The king watched as the waves of harmony touched each student, strengthening their connection without overwhelming their individual natures. "Your abilities," he said slowly, "they've grown stronger." "No, father," Thera corrected him with a soft smile. "They've grown clearer. The strength was always there. Earth just helped me understand how to use it properly." Sarah saw the moment the king's resistance cracked. His scales shifted to a shade she'd never seen in Vexalian diplomatic records, the color of dawn breaking after a long night. "Show me," he whispered. Thera guided her father through the basic movements, teaching him how to strike the chimes with intention rather than force. The sound they created together wavered at first, uncertain and awkward. But as the king learned to feel rather than control, to listen rather than command, the harmony began to grow. The garden responded to their shared music. Plants swayed in rhythmic patterns, their bioluminescence pulsing in sync with the emotional wavelengths. The meditation students opened their eyes, their combined awareness adding depth to the harmony. "My daughter," the king's voice broke slightly as the full reality of what he had almost lost hit him. "Can you forgive an old fool who couldn't see the beauty in being different?" Thera's scales blazed with joy as she embraced her father. "There's nothing to forgive," she said, her voice carrying the wisdom Earth had taught her. "We can only grow forward, not backward." Sarah watched as father and daughter began to heal, their combined chimes creating a new song of hope and understanding. Above them, the cherry blossoms continued their eternal dance, witnesses to another barrier falling before the simple power of love and acceptance. The great chamber of the Galactic Council glittered with crystalline light, its ancient halls transformed by the addition of Earth's living gardens. 5 years had passed since a human diplomat made an impulsive decision that changed the course of galactic society. Now those same halls witnessed another historic moment. Thera stood before the assembled representatives, her scales shimmering with purpose as she presented the final results of the Interspecies Emotional Development Initiative. Behind her, the data streams told a story that none could deny. A 40% reduction in interspecies conflicts, a 60% improvement in diplomatic relations, and most importantly, thousands of gifted children now thriving instead of hiding their abilities. "The evidence speaks clearly," she addressed the council, her voice carrying the strength of experience. "When we choose understanding over fear, growth over suppression, we all become stronger." Sarah watched from her seat among the Earth delegation, remembering the frightened young princess who had once trembled before this same assembly. Now, Thera moved with grace and confidence, her natural abilities enhanced rather than constrained by her training. The Galactic Council recognizes Princess Thera of Vexalia, Earth-trained emotional development specialist. The chief counselor announced, their translator struggling to convey their mix of respect and lingering amazement. "Your proposal for the establishment of the Interspecies Academy of Emotional Sciences has been approved." The chamber's atmosphere shifted as Thera struck her ceremonial chimes. The sound rippled through the space, carrying with it an echo of every success, every breakthrough, every moment of understanding that had led to this point. The gathered representatives, many of whom had once laughed at the idea of human emotional wisdom, found themselves swaying slightly with the harmony. 5 years ago, Thera began, her scales dancing with joy. I stood in this chamber as an unwanted child. Today, I stand here as proof that no child should ever be unwanted, no ability should ever be feared, and no tradition should ever prevent us from growing together." The chamber's living gardens bloomed in response to her words, their bioluminescence creating patterns that mirrored the emotional resonance of the gathered species. It was a technology developed by combining Vexalian empathic science with Earth's understanding of natural harmony. "The Academy will welcome students from all worlds," she continued, as holographic displays showed the campus under construction in New Singapore. "We will teach not just control, but understanding. Not just power, but wisdom. This is Earth's gift to the galaxy. The knowledge that our differences make us stronger when we learn to embrace them." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as her daughter, both by choice and by love, unveiled the Academy's motto. "Through understanding, we grow together." The words appeared in every major galactic language, surrounded by the symbolic representation of emotional harmony that Kythera had developed. The chief counselor rose, their outer membrane glowing with formal approval. "Let the record show that on this day, the Galactic Council acknowledges Earth's contribution to our collective development. The same wisdom we once dismissed as primitive has proven to be the key to our future." Kythera turned to Sarah, her scales showing the pattern they had created together to represent family, not by blood, but by choice. Around them, the council members who had once laughed now stood in respect, many accompanied by their own children who had benefited from Earth's teachings. "Mother," Kythera said softly, but her voice carried through the chamber, "shall we show them our newest harmony?" Sarah joined her daughter, and together they struck the chimes in a pattern that spoke of hope, of growth, and of a future where no child would ever be called unwanted again. The sound echoed through the council chamber, carrying with it the promise of a galaxy forever changed by a simple human truth, that love, understanding, and acceptance were the most advanced technologies of all.